Spirituality with host Don McDonald.
A miracle of any adult's existence is his or her relationship with children. It may be with one or many, with one's own or with those you meet as a caretaker or teacher or just as a friend. Sometimes these relationships are clouded by our own inadequacies, an episode of anger, a failure to pay attention at the right moment. We feel badly, and our children almost always forgive us. What are we going to feel when we finally understand the devastating legacy we are leaving our children? Are we going to say, as Thomas Berry fears, "We've had our fun, now you cope with it"? Can we really expect our children and their children to ever forgive us?
It's a wonderful area where I grew up in the late teens and the 20s, and it was such a beautiful world. But it got this sense of industrialization. Some of it came after the Civil War, when the South was defeated, and that destruction continued up pretty much through the 19th century. Beginning of this century, when I come along, I get some of this feeling of recovery, not only recovery, but committing themselves to the industrial world and wanting to outdo it. And North Carolina has outdone the whole of the states in one thing, in building roads. We have more state-supported roads than anybody, than any state. But we still, out of a meager budget, North Carolina's legislature just passed a bill providing $9 billion for more highways, whereas they subtracted 40% from basic education. It shows a commitment to the industrial world. We have this research center that's the glory of the state now, where 30 of the biggest industrial corporations put their research on a 5,000-acre area and so forth. But it's killing the place, and they say it makes jobs. I go down and I denounce the research center. I denounce the road building. I denounce the whole idea of bringing in outside industrial companies for the sake of making jobs. I go down and I say, you start off now with this big, prestigious research center. Then you have to build these thousands of homes for the high-paid people. You have to be good homes. Then you have to change the streets. You've got to change the water system. You've got to change the waste disposal system. You've got to have new water. Then you have to have an international airport. And then, where does it end? It doesn't end anywhere. I say, that's not the genius of the place. The genius of North Carolina, it has its mountains, it has its wonderful Piedmont section, it has its wonderful coastal plain, and its seacoast. All fertile regions. And I say, what we need is a culture of our own. Are we so dumb that we can't make an internal economy? Are we so lacking in mental creativity that we can't create our art and our poetry and our music? The terminal Cenozoic is dominated by patriarchy. The new age, the basic symbol, will be nurturing and being nurtured in a community of subjects, not a community of objects. It will also be a place where people will be educated for roles, not for jobs, primarily. We need jobs, but what we need really are people with roles, people with vocations who are following certain instincts as regards human occupations that are really human, that are not putting people to work in factories where they do some particular job and lose all their skills, all their human skills in the process. I was reading something about the Aborigines of Australia not long ago, where it says that every person is artist, every person is poet, every person is a craftsperson, every person does everything. Just such a remarkable thing. We have professional poets, and we have professional musicians and so forth. We all should be musicians. We all should be poets. All children should write poetry. It should be the education, the music, and the dance, and so forth. The people that have kept this diversity of function generally are women. They are being brought out of it by their participation in patriarchal corporation establishments. But sometimes when I talk to women, I ask, do you really want your share in the patriarchal world? Of course, everybody wants their share in the benefits of things, but do you really want to become a support and to be present and to be used even though you're in charge of the thing, even though you get the managerial position? Is that what you really want? Or do you want to establish a way in which you keep some of your ostracism from the higher things and turn it into a blessing and pursue new types of survival, new roles that can be established or would work toward the type of society that I'm outlining here is what I call the ecozoic age.
Discover Roots, today's guide to biblical tradition by the Catholic Bishops of Canada. All Canadian Roots is designed for the classroom and for independent learning. Roots links new questions to the old wisdom of Scripture and Catholic tradition. Adults, too, will want this beautiful one-stop personal library, a great parish resource. Call, fax, or write us for Roots.
Couples sharing their experience with other couples, the way it feels comfortable for them. People come up and say, my goodness, you know, what you were saying sounds so much like our marriage, and we've had similar kinds of situations, and it's so reassuring to understand that we're not alone, that we're not the only ones going through this at this time.
And that's basically what the weekend is about, taking stock.
Every time we come here, we get more and more out of marriage encounter. It's not something that's a one-time thing.
When I found out I was pregnant, the first thing I wanted to do was run. But I didn't know where to go, or what to do. I guess I didn't want to care. But I did care, a lot. I cared about this little guy, and me, and our life together.
Caring about a child takes courage. The Catholic Women's League in your area celebrates those who have the courage to care.
One of the questions which Tom and myself felt that we should get into is this very difficult question for a Christian theologian to accept as a question. And it's the question of why this devastation of the planet has happened in Christian civilization, has happened within a Christian view of life. And it seems to me that if there is to be the kind of conversion, metanoia, that Tom is proclaiming here, that we have to live with this question, we have to sit with this question, and not be too glib in trying to deal with it. And I hope that I myself will not be glib. Well, these remarks will lead to a discussion of that why is to something which perhaps is not in your minds, but it's been in my mind for quite a while. And that's the grace of shame, the scandal of what we have done to the earth. And I think this grace of shame that this is leading up to, I think we have to let this area of our life, of our shameful conduct, coalesce with other areas. And now in this winter of our life in the church, as Karl Rahner has told it in this posthumously published work, other shame, the shame of our treatment of the Jews, anti-Semitism down the centuries, the shame of the treatment of women in the church, the shame coming from what happened in the colonialization process, which I think interacts with this whole ecological question. Does Christianity now stand under judgment with respect to whether the power it has exercised on this earth has been a beneficent power or a malevolent power? Has Christianity been a blessing or a curse to this earth? That's a very, very hard question for me, but I'm grateful that at least I've come to the point where I can really listen to it in God's presence as a question. I think we need to recognize as we grapple with this question that responsibility is according to awareness. Now, I'm not interested in guilt trips for myself or for anyone else. I think no group, no generation is to be judged on what it was more or less innocently unaware of. And there is a sense in which in past centuries we were not aware. Even in our present time, we were not aware. There's consolation in that prayer of Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I think I can say as a theologian that now this present predicament and the realization of what we Christians have done to contribute to the disaster and to the crisis, I think has to send us back to the scriptures, has to send us back, for example, to the promise of Christ. I will be with you all days till the end of the world. I think our present crisis now gives us a vantage point where we now have to look for further understanding of what that means. We really don't fully know what the promise of Christ or what anything else Christ has said, the Beatitudes. We will never finish our understanding of what he has said, because we will never finish living in history, and each new situation in history is giving us a perspective from which we can look back in that whole hermeneutical process to try to understand the meaning of the gospel. But I think this all leads up to our need for acknowledgement, our need to confess to one another, to God and to the earth, that we have sinned, and to look for forgiveness and reconciliation. And that leads me to this theme of what I would call ecological shame. So I'm talking here about shame as a grace, and of course it's a very delicate thing. And there is a whole psychological dynamic. Not everyone is at the stage of their life when you might say it's safe to ask for this grace. Someone, say, who has been struggling with neurotic shame, may have to wait a while before the moment has come to ask for this kind of shame. But I think that is a valid distinction. So I think what we're being called to individually and together in the church is to find ways of sharing our sense of shame in afflicting ourselves and in afflicting others.
We don't do things effectively except under this inspiration of something wonderful to be achieved. What should attract us is the fact that our children need us to do this. The children, grandchildren, on and on and on. That the disaster of our times is, and the awfulness of it is what we've done to the world of the children. Almost 90% of any generation goes into bringing the next generation into being, educating them and guiding them on to the future. And any generation that does not do well by its children is in a destructive pattern for itself and for the human community itself, and ultimately for the planetary process. No generation that I know of has ever done such damage to their children as my generation has done. My generation that has lived through the major part of the 20th century is giving the future a world such that the children will live amid the ruined infrastructures of the industrial world, and indeed amid the ruins of the natural world itself. Now, the industrial world that we have made can be done once at this order of magnitude. It cannot be maintained, or can it ever be done again? It's ruins that we are making, everlasting ruins. We are ruining the atmosphere. We are ruining the mountains forever. We are ruining the rivers for the indefinite future. We are ruining the whole biosystem of the planet and handing it on to the next generation. So, well, we had our fun, now you have yours. It's a rather devastating thing for my generation to begin to awaken to what we have done. Now, why can I say that? That it can only be done once, cannot be maintained, or can it ever be done again? There are three reasons. The first reason is that when the industrial period was set up, it was energized by the vision of the brightness of things. They didn't see the dark side. They didn't see the downside. And they were under the fascination and the entrancement of the bright side of the story, and they didn't see the deadly side. It was an entrapment. A deadly entrapment. And all the advertising to this day is entrapment. It's to entrap us more deeply into something that is ultimately the creation of ruins. For instance, take the whole industrial world. Take the whole of the managerial profession, the whole of the education and economics. What is it geared to? The whole process is geared to taking the greatest possible amount of natural resources, put them in as quickly as possible through the processing consumer economy to the waste heap. The faster that goes, and the more the natural world is consumed, the higher the GNP, and the happier we're supposed to be. So, that is the mythology of our times. Now, we didn't observe the rising junk, the rising garbage heap, the rising amount even till recently of radioactivity sites of disposal. And we still refuse to recognize them. We still are fighting this. We're still in the state of denial. And it is to assault that state of denial that we need people that can speak to this. The second reason is it takes more to maintain it, many times more, 10 to 20 to 100 to 1,000 times more to maintain the system than it did to put it up in the first place. And so We don't have the financial resources. In fact, that's one of the things that's happening now. People beginning to recognize the industrial system is totally and universally bankrupt. Totally and universally bankrupt. The money is not there, no matter how much they juggle figures. The whole system is financially a disaster. And they're trying to now, with this rising stock market, we are on the top element of a wave that everybody knows is going to break. The third thing is the energy, the finances, the natural resources. The natural resources are diminished. And the natural resources are not even there anymore. And so when you put these three together, and you see that the present system is breaking up, like take the highways that were made after the last war. Almost all the highways in the States, the superhighways, were built after the last war. But now they're breaking up all over the place, constantly. They can repair one sector, you can repair this, repair that. You can't possibly maintain it. It's beyond maintaining at this order of magnitude.
In 1976, a small group began to notice that so many important and hopeful things that were happening in the church weren't being reported. The Catholic New Times started, that it continues, says a lot about the vitality of our church in Canada.
Special offer, 23 issues, only $15. Call 361-0761 or write Catholic New Times, 80 Sackville Street, Toronto, Ontario, M5A 3E5.
To see the Holy Land, to learn about the land, tradition, and culture of Jesus, call 416-925-2493.
A typical day for us is a lot of stress because you don't know what is going to happen during your day. You can meet very nice people, you can meet big problems, just trying to help somebody.
Sometimes it's really hard, but it's nice because the kids can learn that they have to share.
It's a personal decision to work together, but it's something inside to coming from I don't know where.
The process is at this order of magnitude, this order of functioning, and as we move into the future, we've got to deal with this. Sometimes people ask me, as one interview for some publication asked me, why do you do all this? Why don't you, why do you do all this? And my reply generally is that I cannot bear to leave the children a planet any more desolated than I can help. And in a sense, it's, I would say simply, for the children.
Thomas Clark has in this episode called on us to think again about our shame, a very unfashionable concept in this age of the guilt-free, and to apply this shame to the ecological destruction we are still willfully causing. Thomas Berry has explained that he personally can no longer bear the weight of the shameful legacy we are leaving behind for our children, and he has asked us to think through just how can we bear it.
Raising a daughter with the awareness that I think I have achieved or whatever by listening to someone like Tom Berry, I realized that children do have it inherently in them. the love for nature, the love for God, affinity for characters like Jesus. It's a natural love that they have, and somehow we lose that, and we have to recapture it. As Tom says, that's part of our education process, to recapture back our childlike nature.
When the children and I go to trees, we go to nature, I take them to a wildlife sanctuary, we camp for a week, no TV, no radio, no money, no little candy, but they love it, and they just identify, they recapture something that's lost, more than what the religions, you know, whatever the theologies can offer them, and they cry when they have to go back. So somehow the natural world has touched them.